Excellent Leadership Podcast listeners, we are back with another great guest, Mel Raines, Chief Executive Officer of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, which includes the Indiana Pacers, Gainbridge, and the Indiana Fever of the WNBA, where we've all been following the pop icon and force of nature known as Caitlin Clark. Mel began her career in a Fortune 10 company before working on Capitol Hill, where she ran massive political conventions. There's no story quite like Mel's, and it's nothing short of extraordinary. We'll dive into the world of politics and how that shaped her leadership, to her role now where she's transforming the business of sports as one of only 5 women at the helm of an NBA team. Let's get things started. Hi, I'm Chad Biagini, host of the Excellent Leadership Podcast. I'm joined with my colleague Mark Mayleben and Mel Raines, CEO of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, which is the Pacers, it's the Fever, an amazing arena, and plenty else. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll just jump right in. I mean, your background, you began in politics. You've been part of Super Bowl host committees. You're CEO of Pacers Sports and Entertainment now. I mean, what a journey, but take us back to the beginning. How does a young girl decide to get started in politics?
Well, the book should probably be The Accidental Career because it wasn't intended. I was actually a television advertising major in college at IU. I did an internship, as most of us do in college, and I realized I did not like advertising, and I was a junior. And I thought, well, I'm not going to change my major now, so let's just finish it out and see what happens. And I did an internship in DC my last semester. I wanted to be in a bigger city, and I just fell in love with it. I love DC, never took a poli-sci class, just thought it was a great city. People are playing softball on the mall. I mean, it's just great when you're young. So I applied for an internship in Senator Coates' office, and I was the only female who applied, which I think helped my application because I'm sure it was not a great application. And I got the job, and toward the end of the summer, there was an entry-level opportunity, and they hired me. So it was truly accidental. Yeah.
And tell us more about your political journey, because what a foundation for your career that I'm sure has helped you through your career now, but walk us through it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent about 4.5 years in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, and just with a great office. And of course, when you look back now on your career, there were some real superstars in that office that have gone on to do unbelievable things. And our legislative director was Mitch McConnell's chief of staff, who just stepped down from being the majority leader, and I think she just retired. Just a brilliant woman. Another one of our LAs went on to be like the number 3 person at Ford Motor Company, and wow. He's been at SoftBank and Boeing. I mean, anyway, an office of really amazing people to start your career with. Just a great way to start. And I am not super into policy. I'm more of a political person, and if you're in politics, it's a little bit like being now like basketball or business. You're sort of like, you're one or the other. And for me, I was more into the political side of things. And so I decided I wanted to work on the Republican convention in San Diego. I think because it was in San Diego. I don't think it was particularly anything more than 5 years on the Hill is a long time. I wasn't going to ever, become the chief of staff. That wasn't really going to be my path there. And so I applied. I probably had 5 interviews for different jobs, and I finally got one. And then I moved out to San Diego and just got the bug, like the big event bug you get when you've been around enough of these things. And it's just at a young age, you get to do so much more than you would get to do if you were in a real job, because you've got this deadline. There's a lot going on. Information comes late, and whoever's willing to stand up and do the work usually gets to do it. And so for me, it's just this amazing opportunity at 25 or 26 to do really cool work. And I thought as soon as it was over, I want to do that again. So I went back to the Republican National Committee, worked on the one in Philadelphia. I was the 5th person they hired, and so opened the office in Philly. I was there for almost 18 months and saw that from beginning to end. And that sort of then began, I've worked on 6 of them as a consultant or a full-time staff person, the Republican conventions, and learned something different in each one. And that.
How long do those take to prepare, by the way? Because we know as consumers, we only see them every, 3.5 years?
4 years. Yeah. It's interesting. I think they're changing, and I think Gretchen Shear has the next one in Houston. So they, unlike sporting events or conventions, like traditional conventions, they bid years out. I mean, we've got things on the books in Indy for 10 or 12 years for traditional Future Farmers of America convention kind of stuff is really far out.
It's that far out for those planning. Wow.
It is, yeah. I mean, they're huge citywides. They are. But for conventions, they used to, you'd finish one, and then about a year later, you'd do site selection, and then you'd maybe pick, and you'd have about 2 years, give or take. You'd staff up 18 months out, was sort of the traditional model. I haven't worked on one now since 2016, but that's traditionally how they did it. And you don't know, in some cases, you don't know your nominee. So right now, if you were looking at 2028, President-elect Trump can't run again. So you don't know who the nominee is going to be. So it's a little easier. Like, for instance, I worked in 2004 and President Bush was going to be the next nominee. It's a lot easier when you know who your boss is. You're sort of, otherwise you're designing a podium. You don't know who the candidate is. They may hate it. They come in late. You don't know until April or May. And this is going to be sometimes in July or August. So you've got to thread a lot of needles, but it's a great way to learn. It's a national special security event. It's the highest level DHS rating. I think Super Bowls are at one level below that. Wow. They used to be. And so you really just get this experience that's once in a lifetime and became very translatable. I didn't go into it thinking that it would, but it ended up doing that.
What types of roles did you have within that ecosystem?
Well, my first one was truly an assistant. I mean, I was a jack of all trades, and I was an assistant to one of the top people. So that was great because I just got the seat to see everything.
Wow.
And then I became, on accident, a specialist in ticketing and credentials for it because somebody sort of didn't work out in the job 3 weeks out in Philly, and they said, you don't have the job you had anymore. You have to go fix this.
Wow.
Which was not in good shape. And then I thought, I'd really like to do this right from the beginning. I cleaned it up. It happened. It wasn't pretty. But if you could do that beginning to end, it would be it would be really cool to see it done right. And so when 2004 rolled around, I actually had a full-time job. I was in government affairs at Philip Morris Companies, Inc., which at the time had Miller Brewing, Kraft Foods, Kraft Nabisco, and Philip Morris USA International. So huge Fortune 10 company, great government affairs job. I wasn't going to leave it to work on a convention for short term, but I was able to do it on a contract. And it was in New York, and I was in New York every week, based in DC, but back and forth. So I was able to make both of those things work. And it was great because I really got to do it the way I wanted to do it. And then it became my side job. Did it for 3 or 4 more, I guess.
On contracts where you had a full-time gig somewhere else.
Once I came back, I mean, so it's a lot of back and forth. When I finished my second convention, I went to Philip Morris, and then I went to the White House from Philip Morris, and I worked for Vice President Cheney. He wasn't running again. And so in 2007, my boss from the Bush campaign said, I'm going to go run the convention, and I'll only do it if you'll be my number 2, because I had done enough of them, and she had not done one. So Vice President Cheney was great and said, I'm not running for anything. You're going to be bored around here for the next year. You should go do it. So I did that. I was COO of that one, and I did the credentialing just because I knew how to do it, and it was easier than managing it. But I was really the COO of that. And then I did 2 more on contract where I just did the credentialing. So,
wow. So you're in, what role did you have at the White House?
I was the assistant to Vice President Cheney for political affairs, and that is sort of amorphous, but in essence, anything he was going to go do to support anyone running. So I would make the recommendations in conjunction with the president's political director, who was an old friend of mine. So they would, who would be the right person to go help a gubernatorial candidate, a senatorial candidate, someone running for the House in that area of the country, and making sure that they're not tripping over each other. So obviously Vice President Cheney is very popular in the West, especially in 2007, 2006, 7, and 8. He typically was doing more West Coast trips. President Bush, super popular in the South. I don't want to say that they aren't popular, but you would sort of try to figure out the right places. And then they might be doing international travel. So who was available at the time that they needed you? And then picking the races, you couldn't do them all. So we did, when I was there, about 120 trips and maybe, I don't know, it was not very long, 7 months of that election cycle. We squeezed a lot in because Vice President Cheney really wanted to try to keep the House and the Senate. They were Republican controlled in 2006. We did not achieve that goal. Unfortunately, we lost 32 House seats and 6 Senate seats that cycle. It was traditionally when you're in that third midterm of a presidential, it can be kind of brutal, and it certainly was for us. But we were everywhere. And then you might
you went with them on all those trips.
Yeah.
Looking back on that time, how did I get here? I'm living
a million times. I thought that, Mark,
young girls' dreams right now.
I mean, you think, I'm this kid who grew up in South Bend, Indiana, went to IU, didn't go to an Ivy League school, didn't study to do this necessarily. Thankfully, in the interview, he didn't ask me if I had taken any poli-sci classes because I would have had to answer truthfully.
You just wanted to keep throwing the ball on the lawn.
Yeah,
This
I just wanted to play softball on the mall, literally. And the first time I got on Air Force Two, I think it was like my second day. I started and they had booked a trip and I was on the trip, and I just remember thinking, like, how in the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
And,
cool.
And it's amazing. And he was a fantastic person to work for. He had been the White House Chief of Staff himself. And so he sort of understood what it was like to be a staffer in that situation, which is pretty rare to have a boss who did. His standards were very high. He was incredibly fair. Don't make up an answer. You better know the answer or get back to him. I mean, you wanted to keep your credibility in that way. I just absolutely loved working for him. I learned so much from him. It really gives you, I mean, first of all, if you ever have the opportunity, do it. I mean, it's an incredible personal sacrifice to do, usually financially. You have very little personal life when you're doing it. And you learn, there's no net under the tightrope. You're going in every day. You're doing what you think is the best thing for the country or the situation that you're in. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're wrong. You're on the front page of the paper when you're wrong. No one gives you credit when you're right. But you're in it together. It definitely feels like a team. One of the things I learned from him that I try to taken into every job I've had since is he was the best listener I've ever worked for. He'd ask you a question. It's common in DC, especially if you've already heard whatever you're going to say, the person is telling you, you just sort of cut them off. Yeah, I already know that. I never heard him do that. And I would sit in on other briefings that he had from his head of legislative or policy. And it was something I know I had already spoken to him about. And he would always listen to their entire explanation because they may tell him something differently than I did, explain it with a different nuance, have more information. He was just the best listener. He didn't feel the need to dominate a conversation. And I really thought that was an amazing way to lead.
In politics, there must be an exorbitant number of great leaders. And when I say leaders, I mean casting a vision, communicating that, rallying people around it. Are there a lot of great managers who know how to actually get it done and work well and build cultures?
That's a really interesting question. No one's ever asked me that. I would say there are some, but it is not something that's put a lot of emphasis on. I would say somebody who was a great manager in the White House, our Chief of Staff, David Addington, was a really good manager. Karl Rove is a really good manager. I sat in on his meeting every day that I wasn't traveling, and he doesn't miss a detail. I mean, he is obviously visionary. He's brilliant, but he's in the weeds tactically too. And I thought that was sort of rare. But I will say in my career, the reason I think I'm sitting in the seat I'm in today was my time at Philip Morris. And no one ever asks about it. It's not the sexiest job I've ever had. Although if you're in government affairs, you usually want to work for a company that has problems. Yeah. And that is a company that I was never bored working at. They had a great program, training, strategic planning, finance. They were doing diversity training in 2001. I mean, they were just well ahead of their time and when they had a hypo, and I was lucky enough to be one. And so that foundation is really what helped me become, I think, good at project management, people management, those kinds of things. And in politics, you live to fight another day. I usually knew my last day on my first day. When I went to the White House, I wasn't going to work there a day longer than January 20th, 2009 at 11:59 a.m., even if I was the best person who's ever done that job. And so you don't deal with problems. You don't deal with personnel issues. You just plow through it. You move people aside. Rarely do people get fired. And so that's not really, when you're running a business, the best way to run a business, as you both know. But that time at Philip Morris really gave me a great foundation to be able to pivot out of politics eventually and do something in business.
I always wonder in politics how many people in senior roles fully believe in what they stand for publicly, or whether that's what they think the public wants them to stand for, and then therefore they build campaigns around it. What's the answer to that?
I think I've been lucky that the three people I've worked for, so Senator Dan Coates, Congresswoman Susan Brooks, and Vice President Cheney, absolutely were not going like this every day and trying to get reelected. All of them could have done other things that would have been very impactful and lucrative. That wasn't the best thing they were probably ever going to do in their lives. And I really respected how they took votes, sometimes really hard votes. And they weren't just trying to win the next election. There are certainly a number of people in politics who don't stay in office that way. And that wasn't my experience. Now, it's also difficult because I didn't always believe in everything they believed in. But you're the face of that, just like every other staff person there. And so you may disagree behind closed doors. And when you walk out of that door, you're 100% on board. And it can be hard sometimes when you aren't philosophically aligned with the person you work for. Just like these jobs in sports can be difficult at times too. You know, we all have ups and downs on the team side of things, and you put on a brave face and talk about how great your team is and how you know they're going to turn it around and those kinds of things. But in politics, it can be hard when you're more moderate than the member that you work for. And that's changed over time too. I mean, Senator Coates, when I started in 91, was maybe the third most conservative member of the Senate. And when he by the time you got about 12 years later, he was a moderate, and he didn't change. Just how it evolved between when I started in 91, then I went to the House and worked for Congressman Brooks in 2013, 14. It was a whole different world. Not maybe a better world, but it was a different world.
I bet even the House for Senate must just be, the people's house is just a little bit crazier.
The House of Commons is like, we used to say it was like a speedboat that was maybe had a drunk driver behind it. And the Senate's a little bit more like a cruise ship. The House is a wild place to work.
You mentioned earlier that the chief of staff of the vice president went to the national committee after that?
So the woman who had been the political director on the Bush-Cheney campaign in 2000 Maria Acino went on to run the convention in 2008. So I went with her to do that.
But at that point, did you think to yourself, hey, I got such a thrill running these conventions in the past, I want to do that again and make a career of event management? Or because you also had the taste of Philip Morris, you probably could have landed at a big corporate job somewhere too. Yeah. How did you know what you wanted to do at that point?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and that was a hard one because we didn't know who we were going to be nominating. I mean, Bush-Cheney they were going to be done, and Cheney wasn't going to run. I really love working with Maria. This former boss, Maria Acino, is a fantastic leader and manager, which is hard. They're so different. She does both well. And I wasn't ready to make another decision, quite frankly, with sort of what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. So I moved to Minneapolis, St. Paul, technically. She told me I was moving to Minneapolis. I didn't actually look up where, and they picked the Excel Center in St. Paul instead of the Target Center. So I was a little angry when I realized I wasn't moving to Minneapolis. But I didn't probably give it as much thought as I should have. I didn't think I wanted to keep doing these things, but I thought this is probably the transition back out of the White House. And then I can decide what I want to do after.
In that event, was that the last one you did for the
full-time as a full-time employee? Yeah. I did the 2012 and 2016 as a consultant. So I've done 6 total, 3 as a full-time staff person and 3 just as a consultant on the side.
And did you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, I think I'm clearly really good at this. This is my superpower. At least I'm recognized in the industry as being excellent at this. And the events, you kept getting invited back to do it again and again. I guess my question is, at what point did you say, I actually really do enjoy putting on major events? And did that ever translate in your mind back then? Like, hey, maybe sports teams could be the
do the Super Bowl one day.
Yeah. I vividly remember being in Minnesota in the summer of 2007. It might have been May when Indy was awarded the 2012 Super Bowl. And thinking to myself, that could be something interesting. Never worked in Indy professionally. I grew up in South Bend and moved away. So I was going to have to make some connections. So that sort of was there. Honestly, I didn't make that connection until I got out of the White House. So I worked on that convention, went back to the White House to wrap things up for 4 months. And then I was doing political consulting and I was just done. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was over. Didn't want to be in DC. I was ready to just make a change. We all were, asked to leave the administration. Most of my friends didn't have jobs. It was pretty depressing. You're in the winter. I mean, it's just, you're sort of reassessing your entire life, kind of doing an eat, pray, love thing in your head. And I thought maybe that's it, right? Maybe I can get a job on the Super Bowl. I can get home, reconnect. It was, I mean, the thought of working on a Super Bowl, I've always loved football. I grew up in South Bend. So you grow up being a Notre Dame fan, no matter what. And I love football. I love the Colts. I love the Bears. And I thought, this will be the greatest job I've ever had. When I landed it, I certainly, everyone I know in politics was incredibly jealous. Let me at least say that. Yeah,
you landed better than us. How did you
absolutely.
do it? How did you do it?
Yeah.
When you say you landed it,
I applied online with 150 other people for a job.
What, on monster.com or something?
Yeah, their little website, did the, thing, got a phone interview, and then they flew me out. And I think it was primarily that security piece. So they had not hosted something in India of that level before, and they were really concerned. I don't think they needed to be, but I'll take whatever I can get to, make your resume stand out. The coordination of the federal and local and state resources, they hadn't had anyone with that experience, and they were only hiring Hoosiers. They wanted home. They didn't want kind of the event gypsy thing where people are on that train.
And there are a lot of those out there.
There are.
Who just move from one big event to the next. And that's their career.
They wanted people invested in the city who wanted to be there long term. Obviously, I was a little bit different model, but my intent was to move back. And obviously, that's what happened. That's what made my resume stand out. And then I just sort of talked Allison Millington, who ran it, into hiring me. So it was really a fantastic opportunity. And it's so different of an event because when you're doing a convention, and have either of you been to a political convention before?
No, I would love to experience them.
Okay.
Never.
Well, we can make that happen.
Yeah, deal.
But it isn't the best way to showcase your city. And I'd be interested as you talk to people, Gretchen will see this in 4 years. It can be good economic impact. But when you think about going to a Super Bowl, you've been to many or these other, all-star games, and they're setting up, we set up a zip line downtown, and there's outdoor bars, and you're walking around, and it's all of that's going on. At a convention,
it's a celebration.
Yeah, they're setting up riot fencing around the building, people with Uzis and the National Guard, and free speech areas. There's that kind of stuff going on. And I don't know that it showcases a city as in the best possible light. What we've tried to do in India is build this purpose-built downtown to host major events and showcase our city and state to people to think about bringing your convention, relocating your business, making it a place that people want to live and, live, work, and play, and attract and retain talent to all of the great businesses in town. And so we have a strategy around that. I'm not sure that a political convention really checks that box in the same way. It certainly is an influx of dollars, but I've never seen one where the city, I walked away saying that city was beautiful. I walked away thinking thank God we got out of that without an incident, maybe, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. That happened, the Super Bowl. Clearly did a phenomenal job. Then what happened?
We got a little luck too. I mean, I just came from 10 inches of snow, and it was the warmest.
Today.
Yeah, today. Wow. It was the warmest 10-day period in 100 years in Indiana history.
Amazing.
We had a 50-degree Super Bowl Sunday. So in 2012, and we had lost the 2011 bid to Texas, to AT&T Stadium, and it snowed on Super
They got
Bowl
your
Sunday
winter.
in Indy. Yeah, we got it and they got it that year. So I think it was maybe meant to be that we were a year later, but it was just the most fun event I've ever worked on. Just everything clicked. A ton of hard work and preparation certainly met some good luck. And then you have things happen. And I think it's Hoosier hospitality at its finest. But one of my favorite stories is, the local news people are walking around at 6 a.m. and they're looking for a story, and, it's a long day for them. And there were some Giants fans. It was Giants Patriots that year. Giants fans were tailgating. And they said, everything's been great. Everyone's so nice. The only thing is we forgot our hot sauce. And this is where it becomes Indiana. 4 people. So you could tell where they were on TV. Someone walked them hot sauce. Someone biked them hot sauce. Someone drove down and brought them hot sauce.
I love that.
I don't know the other way it got there. And it was sort of like all the work in the world of a host committee and the donors and the volunteers doesn't make that happen.
Yeah, you can't make that
That's
happen.
just like
That's
pride in your state. So that was really special. Yeah.
And through that process, you end up becoming essentially the CEO of this stand-up corporation for...
I was the COO of that kind of number 2. Yeah.
But either way, my point is that you become a very high influential person in the city where all the local business leaders, political leaders, etc., are looking to you to execute on this vision for the event. And I would guess you coming in from the outside, you didn't have all these political connections and business connections. Did that, after the successful event and through the relationships you built through it, did that then maybe cement you in the minds of the owner of the Pacers, for example, to say, hey, she did such an amazing job. How do we bring her here?
Yeah.
Is that how that happened, or what?
It didn't hurt, I would say. And it was the best way to reconnect instantly, because everyone, to your point, was in to make this successful. Every corporation, the governor, the mayor. You were instantly plugged in, to your point. And in this, I was on staff for 2.5 years. I just felt like I had been there for a lot longer. So Rick Fuson, who retired last summer as our CEO, I worked with him a little bit. I didn't work super closely with him on it, but enough that I think I made an impression, certainly. And he's the kind of guy who shoots from the hip. He's, not going to take time to write a 10-page strategic plan. He's going to, he's not young, and he likes what he likes. And so I was, after the Super Bowl, went to work for a member of Congress from Indiana who was running for her first term. She was taking the seat of someone who had been in office for 30 years. So it was a pretty big transition for her. Former U.S. attorney. I got to know her. She was a volunteer for the Super Bowl. Fantastic person. So she asked me to help her get her through her freshman term. I didn't find something I really wanted to do right away. I would be terrible at a 9-to-5 business. It's just not, I've never done something that I didn't have a higher connection to it. Politics really gives you a little bit more passion. So long story short, I was back during August recess. I was having lunch with a friend at the Pacers, and I pinged Rick's assistant and said, I hadn't seen him in a while, and said, hey, is he around? I'd love to say hi. Like literally just my job. He was a constituent, was to talk to as many people as I could and see how we were doing. And we were chatting, and he said, have you ever thought about running an arena? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, I want to hire someone to do that. And I think you might be a good candidate. And I said, well, I never thought about it, but if you decide to do it, let's definitely talk. And maybe 2 months later at election day, I was back for the election, and we got together, and I said, do you want to see my resume or anything? I said, I've been a client in arenas. I've never thought of working in an arena. He said, oh yeah, why don't you send me your resume? And then we got together, and he said, I want to hire you. So it was literally kind of him seeing something in me that I don't think I saw in myself. And I'm incredibly grateful he did, because I've loved it.
Mel, your career in major events is not a 9-to-5. Politics is not a 9-to-5. Running an arena is not a 9-to-5. How have you found ways to define and refine your leadership and management skills along the way? What advice would you have for others who are busy working 24/7 seemingly? Because you do need to find that time to invest into being a good manager and leader. But
you do.
How did you do it?
So part of the story that people haven't maybe totally picked up on, but I was an executive assistant to some really amazing people until I was 30. So on Capitol Hill, at Republican conventions, and at the Republican National Committee, my first job that I didn't go in every day to support another person, a senior person, was literally when I was 30 and I moved to Philadelphia. I think that foundation's been really important to me because I got to see some people and absorb it every day from a front row seat. That to me has been really important. And then, I think you learn more from the bad leaders and bosses than the good ones. I mean, that's a terrible glass half empty thing. But I know for me, I'm sure for you, when you work for someone who's a great leader and a great manager, you don't think about it because they're great and you're following and you're learning and you're growing. And when you work for someone who's bad at it, it's really apparent. And you sort of pick up the pieces like that didn't motivate me. That didn't make me want to go the extra mile. I wouldn't do it that way if I had that position. You sort of think about that the whole time. And I think over the course of 30 years, I've just been able to hopefully take the best of the best. And I've had a lot of jobs. I mean, that's the other thing. I didn't come in and work for this team for 30 years. I'm almost at 10, which is hard to believe. But I've had a number of positions in a bunch of different organizations. And some were great and some were tough. And so I think you sort of piece all that together to get where you are today.
So what are some of the principles that are important to you as a leader, and where did they come from? From book, upbringing? Give us some specifics there.
I'm trying to be more intentional on when you bring up a book, I'm trying to read a little bit more and think about it a little bit more intentionally, because I think it's been a little bit from my gut. So my first boss, Dave Gribben, in Senator Coates' office was weirdly Vice President Cheney's best friend from high school and had been his chief of staff and had been at the Pentagon and came over to our office. And he just was the most amazing leader I've ever worked with and manager. Never lost his cool, always had good perspective. And so that sort of like starting from that foundation, like, you don't want to, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, you shouldn't ride either wave too high. He taught me without teaching me, but by example, I think how to be a good public speaker. I mean, I would follow him, go with him to speeches and things. I think a lot of people don't think of their audience. So they just come with what they're going to say. And he would really tailor it to who the audience was, which I think is so critically important. You might have the best topic in the world. And if you're not delivering it well to who you're talking to, those kinds of, lessons I think have really translated through my career. And there's, I could list 10 other people, but for me, I'm certainly a lead by example kind of person. I am not going to ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do or haven't done before. And the work we have is, to your point, it's hard, long hours, roll up your sleeves. It might be cleaning up a flood before a game. It's all those things. I'm in there doing it too. I mean, and so to me, that's the leading piece, and giving people a vision. Culture is super important to me. And then managing, which people confuse. Managing is really different. And to me, managing is, I need to get to know the person that I'm managing and understand what makes them tick. And what makes me tick and what motivates me is different than Mark and you. If I'm managing you the way I want to be managed, I'm going to fail. Right. That's not the right way to do it. And so you need to get to know people. You need to meet them where they are. You need to understand them. Hopefully they're the right person for the job. I mean, assuming they're the right person for the job. I think to me, it's always been sort of connecting those dots. And one of the examples I would give is, I am a terrible morning person. Yeah. I do not want to really engage with many people before 8:30 or 9 in the morning. I want to read. I need to get my head together. It's just how I'm wired.
Is it because you stay up late, or because you are in the arena late?
I am, but I've just always been that way. I'm just, and Herb Simon, our owner, is like up at 5 a.m.
Ready to go,
ready to FaceTime. I mean, thank God he's on the West Coast often, and I don't, that works for us. But because I'm awake by the time he calls.
You read those books by Jocko Willink, like Cold Plunge at 5 a.m. and it just makes you sick.
Yeah, that's not that. If I'm up at 5 a.m., something is wrong. Bad things have happened. It's not good. But when I come in the office, if I'm walking through the office and I don't care if anyone says good morning to me in the morning. I just don't care, because I'm not a morning person, but I know if I did that, that would set a tone that day, right? So I do say hi to everybody on my way in. I do wish them a good morning. I do say, I hope you have a great day. Not because I care about that, but because I think it's important to them that I'm behaving that way. And so to me, it's just like those small things set the tone for a lot of people. And as you grow in your career, it affects more and more, people. But a lot of this is getting to know your team, getting to know them well on a personal level. And then, living through some tough situations, which we've all done over the last few years, especially. And then I think you can sort of just start firing on all pistons. You know how to give people the right information, direction, kudos when they need it, that kind of stuff.
What do you think are some of the key traits, though, that have led you to not just the position you're in today, but some of these key leadership roles you've had where others have observed you and your persona, your work ethic, whatever it is, and said, she's an absolute athlete. She's best in class at what she does.
I think for me, the basis of all of it is hard work. Yeah. I have always been willing to put my head down and do the actual work. And in this business especially, I was starting from, I had a lot of things to learn. I had never done a ticketing deal. I had never done a food and beverage deal. I had never looked at the events from the building side of things. Right. And so that was, in my first job, it was meeting with every member of my staff one-on-one in my first month. When we had our original food and beverage deal was up and we decided to do an RFP, it was a really deep dive, calling colleagues around the league. I mean, the first person I cold called was Kim Stone, who used to run the arena here at the time, American Airlines Center, I think, and Kim's become a dear friend. I just picked up the phone and called her and started reaching out to people. A lot of them had known each other for years. They didn't know me, and they were all incredibly gracious in their time and knowledge. And whenever I was presented with one of these opportunities, I just did a deep dive on it, and this is how I'm going to learn. And so it's always been for me about the work. I'm not the smartest person in the room. It is, it's just about the grind. And so I think my team knows that. My colleagues certainly know that. And then it's results, right? Yeah. I mean, sometimes you're going to do well, sometimes you're not, but when we don't do well, I hope we learn from that. We get better with that. It's not about the blame. It's not about I want to fail fast. I want to try new things. I don't want people to be afraid to bring those things forward. And listen, we've all had clunkers. That's okay. That's what's put us here today. If I was perfect for 50 years, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Come on, tell us about a classic clunker that you had. You had a moment where you're like, I'm not going to recover from this.
I have had a few of them. One of the bigger ones in this job was actually, if you could go back in a time machine, we had, I've not ever talked about this publicly, the Elton John concert a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, was a COVID, so pre-COVID, it was rescheduled 5 times in essence. He was ill the first time pre-COVID, something else happened, COVID, it kept pushing, right? We renovated the building. So we sold the show. People held their tickets. It's Elton John. You don't get a refund.
Yeah, you just wait for
We renovated the building completely with a completely new seat manifest and reseated it and went to mobile tickets and everything else. And the night of the show, people came with printed out PDFs from 3 years ago. And they had been, photocopied from a friend. So the first person who gets in, that's the ticket. And the person who actually had the ticket, they get rejected. And it was the worst situation I think our team has ever been in real time. It was really rough. And it was not just rough that night, getting yelled at by people. And I mean yelled at. And rightly so. We screwed it up. We probably should have said to his team, we'll cancel the show. We'll guarantee the gross. Thought about this a lot. You'll have at least the gross you have today. And we have a new building and we need to resell from scratch so people are showing up with the tickets. And we didn't do it. Lots of things going on and we should have, and you shouldn't have a show on sale for 4 years and have a new building. We refunded a whole lot of money to people rightly.
You're kicking people out of seats because they think they're in their seat
they
and
couldn't
someone
get
else
into
thinks
the
they are.
seats because the ticket scans. So our big entry pavilion, which is beautiful, was packed. Show started on time. I mean, people even who had suites, imagine you don't have your suite anymore and people held the ticket and tried to get in. Or you did still have your suite. You didn't remember who you invited 4 years ago. You invited 20 new people and 40 people showed up. I mean, this was really a worst case scenario, and it was reputationally damaging to our building. We have a great reputation for a high guest experience and a high volume of events that we execute at a great level. And it was just really disappointing to me personally, that I didn't lead us to figure that out before it fell all around us. And the team couldn't have done a better job of dealing with it and being gracious to people. And we did our best to make it up. We tried to get people into a section that was partially obstructed, but they at least got into the show eventually. But it just wasn't what we want to deliver. It wasn't acceptable, in my opinion. And it was my fault. And it was hard.
So how did you, what did you learn from that to carry forward to today? Not tactically, but just from a leadership perspective.
That was just such a perfect storm. But I think it's just being sure at a high level that you're thinking about these things. As I was standing in the moment, incredibly clear about the fact that we never should have gone forward with this. And I think we could have had an honest conversation with the promoter about the situation we were in. And they, even if they didn't understand, listen, I would have rather, like I said, maybe refunded it, guaranteed the gross. Maybe we would have lost money. Maybe we would have made money, but we reputationally would have been in a better position. And we would have delivered for the people who bought the tickets the way that we expect to. That's probably, since I've been in this job, that night was my greatest disappointment.
But I would imagine the after-game locker room speech from you to the team saying something along those lines actually might have endeared them and drawn them to you, because as a leader, you're saying, I screwed up. Like, I didn't see this happening. You can't do that every day, but that happens every once in a while. Yeah. And being vulnerable, I find, goes a really long way with the team.
Absolutely. And I was out there front of house with everybody else taking it. And I was the one calling the fans with our box office after and handling it. And absolutely. I mean, I'm the first to tell people I don't have all the answers, because I don't have all the answers, but we together have all the answers, and whatever it is, we will figure it out together. That's why we're a team.
So those aren't the fun days at work, but there are fun days. You have Caitlin Clark now. You have a WNBA All-Star. Like, there's a lot of amazing stuff happening. Yeah. How do you feel about all that? How about that?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we've had 2024 was just an amazing year for us. And we're just, a couple weeks into 25, and I'm as excited about it. I mean, we made the in-season tournament for the first one in December of 23, hosted the All-Star game, which we were really, really happy with how it turned out. I thought we showcased the city really well, and the league was just a fantastic partner in that. And then we made the Eastern Conference Finals for the Pacers, and we, drafted Caitlin and had this record fever season, which was unlike anything in my career I could ever imagine. Now we have the WNBA All-Star game coming up, and that opportunity was presented, and you should fire me if I don't jump at it. So we jumped at it, and it's a really great time to be with Pacer Sports Entertainment. We have this newly renovated building with this great plaza. People were ice skating yesterday in the snow, and a new restaurant in Commission Row right next door. And our owner is building a hotel and smaller music venue right across the street on the other side. We have this growing campus, and it's fantastic right now. It's really great. I should probably retire, right? I was thinking if I retire at the end of the fever season, that would be not the dumbest thing I've ever done. Yeah.
Wait till they win a championship.
I know. Yeah. I would like to get a ring. I'd like to get 2 rings. I'd love to get one from each team. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's different managing an organization when it is in absolute growth acceleration mode. How do you continue inspiring new ideas, greatness? We don't even know what the ceiling looks like. The ceiling could be 10 feet higher than we even think it is. How do you instill that into a team?
Absolutely. I mean, the Fever and the Pacers are both, from the business perspective, breaking records for us. And so I think for the Fever, what was really interesting with the Fever last year was we managed those properties. We have a lot of shared services. We're office together. We treat it as one team, truly. But we didn't sell it that way. I mean, the Fever became an NBA team overnight. And the fact that we could lean our entire NBA team, everything we've learned, Todd Taylor and Barry Gibson and Terry Tiernan, who leads, all of our sales and marketing, corporate partnership functions. We just like that became an NBA team. The ticket pricing, how we looked at premium, how we looked at sponsorships, we flipped it on a dime. I don't know many teams that would be able to do that. And now we're looking at it just like we do with the Pacer side. How can we continue to grow that? Yeah. And there is no, if you're looking to me for a finish line on sponsorships, there isn't one. Yeah. There should be no finish line on that. I mean, certainly tickets are a different story, and you want to be sure people feel a good value for it. But I think we have an amazing strategy for that this year too. We all sort of hung on. We sort of electric taped the rocket ship together and hung on to it last summer, and now we're driving it a little bit better. It's really fun to see. But I mean, to me, it's bring me the ideas and let's figure out how to do them. And WNBA All-Star Game was. We had 7 years to plan the NBA All-Star Game because of COVID. We got it in 17 for 21. It pushed to 24. I've never been so ready for an event to, take place. And this one is about 11 months beginning to end. I'd love to have a little bit more time. But what I said to the team is dream big. Let's change the way they think of this tentpole event. And I will raise the money to do it. Don't worry about the money. Come up with the ideas, maximum community impact, legacy projects, dress up this downtown in July, which is a great time of year to be in Indiana, bigger than they've ever seen it, and I will get you the money. That's my job. And so that's sort of how I'm trying to, lean everybody into that kind of thinking.
With the same staff in a lot of places, how do you help them change their frame of mind then? Because if you're used to finding efficiencies in a business and doing things somewhat better than yesterday, and then you're told, don't even worry about money, come up with the biggest idea. You have to create dreamers within an organization. How did you do that?
It's certainly a mindset shift. I think we're working on it, to be honest. I mean, there's still a little bit. We have had this team for 25 years. This will be our 26th season on the Fever side. I don't want to say everybody carte blanche can do whatever they want. That's not the answer either. We have parameters, but from the way we're staffing and supporting the team, both teams, I think, have grown exponentially. Make the case. I will listen to anybody who wants to make the case for why we need something, more of something, investing in technology or investing in more people, or, how we tell our story. I think the content side is so, even in 10 years, what our digital team is. I mean, and we went from an AAU team to an NBA team, right? In terms of what digital does for our business. I understand why we need to do that. I want to invest in those kinds of things. But then some of it, you certainly have to say, this isn't the Fever of 5 years ago. How we look at community engagement when we have these players now, Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and of course, Caitlin, show up at something. We need security. Everything is different. And so wipe your mind of how it used to work. I don't care how we always did things. We have to think about it completely differently. And thankfully, we have the model on the Pacer side to do a lot of that. And then it's just pushing. We can be more creative. 22 games this year. I'd love to sell all of those 22 out. We'll see how close we get. There certainly doesn't seem to be any lack of enthusiasm in the off season. And then using the WNBA All-Star Game to really push that, just like we did the NBA All-Star Game. A big part of why we wanted to do that, not just for our city, to highlight the city, the economic impact, but to highlight the Pacers and now the Fever to the best basketball players in the world. We have great franchises. We support those teams really well operationally. The players generally like living in Indiana and like our city and state. Nobody loves the sport of basketball more than we do. The fans know the game. They love the game. So how can we showcase these franchises to the best players in the world? That's a big part of our strategy here too. And so that's just fun, right? I mean, that's what we should be doing.
On the commercial side, you guys are obviously just killing it right now. culturally, I would guess there's enthusiasm you've probably never seen before related to that. On the hiring front, are you getting a lot of traditionally, as you know, it's a male dominated sport. Like on the business side of the house, it's changing and has changed over recent years. But are you getting a lot of like women applying to come work for the team, and how has that shifted things?
Yeah, it is not hard to hire people for the Indiana Fever. I will say. I mean, it just any job we could have an assistant operations job, and you'll get 2,000 resumes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just wild. Yeah, so
amazing.
I think it puts us in a position to be able to select the best talent. I'm not sure that it was always the case that we had that kind of talent applying for the positions, and we are able to move people between teams. So that's also an opportunity. Cool. Maybe we've utilized in the past, but we've revamped the leadership of the team on the business and the basketball side for Fever. Kelly Krauskopf came back from the Pacers. She started the team, went over to the Pacers, came back. That was my best lobbying job I've ever done in my life. And Amber Cox, we just hired from the Dallas Wings. She's phenomenal. Just love her. And then got Stephanie White back. And so much of leading it is getting the right people in the right seats, headed on the bus in the right direction. We absolutely have that right now with the Fever. And then we have an ownership group, Herb Simon and the Simon family and Stephen Rails, who owns 20% of the teams now, are just absolutely invested in both of these teams. From a women's sports perspective, Indianapolis really wants to be the epicenter of women's sports, and we're working on exactly what that means. But I think the Fever are a huge part of that, and we want to be supportive to that vision that the Indiana Sports Corp, our sports commission, has, and so does the Simons, and so does Mr. Rails. And so I just think we have nothing but opportunity here.
Mel, when you hear advice that's often given to an outside hire who becomes a CEO, the advice is often, cast a vision, establish a culture, but don't move too fast, because you need to listen. You need to find who the people are already in the business, who are on the bus, who you want to keep on the bus, but find some early wins those first 90 days. The advice to an internal promotion must be different than that, because you already know a lot of an organization. What did you find was successful for you onboarding into a CEO job internally? What advice would you have for others who might be stepping into their first CEO job from an internal promotion?
I would say it's the same as any time I've moved into a new job. Sometimes moving up in an organization or sideways, I spent a lot of time listening. So I had about half the company reporting to me on the business side, and didn't have a lot of interaction with the Fever, interestingly. And that team reports to me now. I have a lot to learn on a different side of the business. I have a long runway to do that, which was nice, but really digging into the pieces that I don't know as well. And then I have trusted leadership in the other areas. I don't need to micromanage those people. They know what they're doing. They've worked with me and under me for a long time. To me, it's been a bit of a listening tour and a learning tour, and trying to dig in on those other areas. And I think I had the advice from another female who has this job in sports, and she said, you're not going to be good at this for probably 2 years, right? Your first year, you're going to learn a lot. Your second year, you're going to try to implement a lot, and then you're going to see how it's working, and you're going to get better. And I'm trying to give myself 6 months in, a little bit of grace along those lines, because we all are personalities. We want to do big things fast. But I also understand change is hard for people. It's a big cultural shift that we've gone through, and I want to make sure that people are believing in where I am, and we're working on a new strategic plan, and that's going to take several months. I'm not a big believer in like going away for 2 days and rewriting your entire business plan and rolling it out. I think it takes a little time. Yeah. Things come to me a little bit over time. So we've started on that. It'll take probably 6 months. We should have it in place by the end of the season. And I really want to be sure that people are clear on our mission and our vision, our core values. If you don't know what direction you're headed and you can't figure that out in your core values, then you probably didn't write them very well. And are we defining them correctly for people? that's important. What respect means to me may be different than what it means to you. I want to be sure we both understand what it means, if that's what's important to our company here. So that's kind of the next step. And I'm glad I gave myself 6 months to figure out, where the coffee machine is, sort of thing, before I dove into that, because I'm still getting my sea legs.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm with you. Defining what you mean by words matters so much within an organization, right? Even you look at the classic story in the Bible of love your neighbor. Who's your neighbor? Is it the person who's next to you? Is it everybody? And that was just wrestled with rabbis for generations, those types of conversations. And so getting a group together underneath common language to say, what does respect mean? To whom? How do we define it? What behaviors and actions and habits matter?
I'm going to steal that analogy. I like that.
Yeah. But it's, thank you. It's there, right? Yeah. You have to actually get in the room and have those conversations. I see the same in politics too. I tend to find people have a lot of the same values: family, respect, opportunity, but they have different opinions on what those things actually mean and which one they prioritize over the other. It doesn't mean one loves it and the other doesn't. They prioritize it different.
Yeah, it's interesting what politics has sort of evolved into. It used to be a little more issues based when I was certainly when I started out. It was, you believe in a strong defense, you believe in, it's
lower taxes,
pro-life, pro-choice, lower taxes, those kinds of things. It's evolved a little bit into like, who's a better American? I'm not here to judge that. I sort of vote for people based on what I think they're going to deliver, on their vision. And to me, those are usually more practical things that are related to outcomes, and not that they're a better American than the other person is. Yeah. That's on the ballot. That's not usually what I do, but it's interesting how it's evolved. To your point, it is defining what that means, and it's not what this famous Supreme Court, when you see it, that doesn't work on core values for a company or a vision for that company. That's really my priority for the next 6 months. Yeah, we have to do it on job descriptions, don't we? Every job description says we need a great communicator. Yeah. Okay, what are they communicating? Yeah. And to what audiences are they communicating that? Yeah. And how do you define good communications in the first place? We all want it. Everyone thinks they're self-aware. Every job description says high performer. What does that mean in your organization? Sense, it wouldn't be, we wouldn't have to talk about it. Absolutely, yeah. My favorite one on job descriptions is special projects as assigned. That's the only one that's accurate. I'm going to throw anything at you that I can't figure out who else can do, and I hope you can do it. Yeah. What advice would you have for somebody whose next job would be to become a president or a CEO? How do they prepare themselves? How do they differentiate themselves? Because the more senior you go in an organization, the more competitive it gets to get in that next role. I mean, we see it all the time in our day job. We might be the first person telling someone they didn't get the job. And they've just gotten used to promotions. They came easy, but the higher you go, the more competitive it is. I never thought about that, you guys. I always guess I figured you were the good news guys. You're also we're the bad news guys. One gets it. So this is what I think for me, if you're thinking about how do you stand out amongst others, for me in this particular company, there were two opportunities that were, I think, available for the taking that I stepped up and volunteered to do. And one was the renovation of the field house that took beginning to end was 7 years, master planning all the way through completion. And then the other was the NBA All-Star Game, bidding, managing the contracts, managing the host committee. I think a lot of people in our company could have stepped up to do those things. I wanted to do them. I thought they would be challenging and I would learn a lot from them. All-Star was one that was probably more in my natural wheelhouse, certainly. The renovation, I had renovated my kitchen once for $30,000. So I'm not sure why they thought I was the right person ultimately, but to me, then that got me in front of ownership in a different way. Because they're real estate developers. Absolutely, they care about this. Totally. And if you're running the building, which I was, SVP Facility Operations, great job. I only was in front of Herb Simon if something went wrong. He expects the popcorn to be hot and the doors to be open and everything to work well and the court's down and the lights are up. And that's the expectation. So you're only really in front of them when something is wrong or you have to explain something bad that happened. It's rare that and it's not the big part of the P&L. It was very rare that I had interaction. So when I started doing the renovation piece, that was where, number one, I learned a lot about the sales and marketing and premium sides and collaborating with my colleagues to see what they wanted. I often said, I don't want to build you anything you can't sell. I'm not in charge of those things. So I'll tell you how we need to operate them. But like, this is a collaboration. And I really learned so much about how they were thinking and approaching it, and then how we sold it, which ultimately helped too. For me, I would say to anybody who's looking to get ahead, if you're just going to do the job description really well, you're probably going to be in that job for a long time. You know, look at the opportunities, and they will be out there to take something beyond what's in your job description and just crush that, and you'll get noticed. And that was certainly what happened for me.
Such good advice. We get calls often, as you can imagine, almost as career advisors.
Yeah.
And that's the number one question I get. Mark, I'm in job X. How do I get to my dream job Y? And often the answer is, well, you've got to do more than job X. Volunteer for another function, take on a special project, get in front of ownership by providing value in some way, and that will unlock the next stage of your career. Good for you for seeing that. And it probably wasn't so intentional as this is my step to get to CEO. It was just, you clearly have a track record of taking on really challenging, interesting projects.
And I enjoy it. I like to learn. I want to be challenged. And so it was a lot. It was drinking from the fire hose a lot, but it was really fun to learn how a construction project like that is managed. I think in another life, I might have been a good construction manager, but I loved all of it. And so it's easier when you really enjoy it. If you love the business you're in, to your point, like, take another bite at the apple, like try some another part of it, or, you know, and for us last year was a great opportunity for people in the company to step up to help with All-Star. Everybody did everything at the All-Star weekend. When we were in Eastern Conference Finals and had the Fever home opener, were back-to-back nights. There were lots of opportunities for everybody to get to do anything they wanted to do. And it was fun to watch people step up. It really was. Yeah. And they were noticed.
And I remember talking to you a few years ago when you're in the midst of all that. You did a tour around the country, really, of some of the best arenas in the country, right? And
we did.
And maybe, did you go global as well for that?
We did not. Okay. We stayed here.
Yeah, because I know the biggest arenas in the world are usually in the U.S. anyway.
Yeah, we went and saw we went and saw recently renovated. We went to Wrigley because they had just done a new, actually our courtside club is very much modeled after their 1914 club behind home plate. So we were a little bit sport agnostic. You know, we were in Atlanta, so of course we went and saw Mercedes-Benz. It's hard to translate. They're so much bigger. But I wanted to see anything that I could because we took an idea from every single one of them. We were at Chase Center the week before they opened, and we were really done with construction drawings almost at that point and going to bid, but we still I mean, you can still tweak. You haven't started knocking anything down or building. So we were really trying to incorporate stealing the best of the best up until the last minute.
That's cool. Yeah. Did you, given that you were managing the project, you probably had the luxury of saying, hey, if we get anything in here right, it needs to be this. What would that be for you?
To me, the thing that had me losing a lot of sleep was people love the field house. It's iconic basketball venue. It's usually in the top 3 in the NBA. It's not intended for hockey. It's a terrible place to watch hockey. It's an intimate bowl. I didn't want to lose the spirit of the field house. I mean, it was that old brick train station feel, and it wasn't going to become, you know, a Miami nightclub, right? That wasn't what we were trying to go for, but we needed to modernize it. And we had to modernize it while keeping the spirit of that building. And that was a fine line. I think we did it. I haven't been kicked out yet, but I was nervous about it. There were some things we were looking at, and I was like, that might be close to the line. And then but we figured it out. But that was a tricky part of it, because it does have that building has a personality. Some arenas don't have a personality. Yeah. That one has a personality. It's like Camden Yards, right? Yeah. I mean, it has a personality, and you have to go with that.
And you made sure they had good popcorn.
Oh, and pretzel. We have the best
And
pretzels in the NBA.
Do you? Is it the pretzel itself or is it the mustard or cheese that comes with
No,
it?
it is Ben's Pretzels. It's a local Indiana company. It's a little bit like eating a fresh loaf of bread. So don't be like carb.
Don't do a lot of
Don't
it.
be in an anti-carb mode when you do it. You don't even have to dip it in anything. It's that good.
Wow.
It is the best pretzel. Yeah.
I had fun. I went to a football match in Germany recently, and on the wall, they just had pretzels and sausages on the wall in the premium. I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm in
Just go
Germany.
grab your pretzel. Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
we get.
And they're both great with mustard.
Yeah.
We will wrap, but before we do, we have 7 questions that we ask everybody. So this is what we call the 7-question blitz. What sports event have you never been to that you would love to attend?
I would like to go to the Winter Olympics. I went to the Summer Olympics for the first time and loved it as a fan. An unabashed
You
American.
just went in Paris?
Yep.
Oh, very cool.
Wore American flag T-shirts.
You saw
A
what?
fanny pack. I saw everything I could just as a
Got
total
the
fan.
pins.
Yeah, we were at volleyball. We saw table tennis,
Amazing.
track and field. Saw a basketball game. Saw diving. It was fantastic. I'm all about the Olympics.
And you're going to which events for the Winter Olympics? You get 3.
Ooh, I
Tickets
would
are hard
do-
to come by.
They are. I would definitely do ski jumping.
Fun.
I would probably do ice skating and curling 100%.
Oh,
I want to be a
yeah.
curler. And I think you can be
Want
in
to
your
be a
50s. So
curler.
I think it's still out there for me.
There's an option for you. All right.
Yeah.
What 3 other people, living or historical, would you want to play a round of golf with?
Do they have to be a golfer or can
No,
you
it
just
could be
in your head, you
anybody
can
you
make them a
want.
golfer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Even if you don't play golf, you're just there to hang.
I mean, I can hit it around okay.
Nice.
I would say, well, Tiger Woods would be sort of fun to be on the golf
Yeah.
course with, right? Get a
Yeah.
couple of tips. So maybe him. I would say Teddy Roosevelt
That's a great answer.
and Margaret Thatcher.
Wow.
Might be an interesting foursome.
What an interesting force.
I'm not surprised, though, that you chose 2 people from politics when you worked in politics. Those are
Yeah.
special, iconic people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, Margaret Thatcher was certainly groundbreaking. I'm a big fan of the Man in the Arena speech by Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
So,
Beautiful.
You've been to a lot of amazing sports events. What sporting event holds the dearest place in your heart? You just go back to this all the time.
yeah, 2016 Cubs World Series. I grew up a Cubs fan. I got to go to the World Series, to one of the games.
That was
and,
one of the best World Series.
It was. And I almost didn't go. My college roommate's up there. She's a diehard fan. And I said, I'm going to come up on the Saturday night game and we'll just go to Wrigleyville to a bar and it'll be great. It was a really busy time at work, but I said that this may not happen again. And at the last minute, a friend of mine came up with 2 tickets for us and we got to go. And it was amazing.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah. A political friend. So a political favor payback, which I was happy to take. Happy
Years
to take.
later.
Yeah.
What's something about you people don't know?
I probably don't know because it's been a while. I've run 5 marathons.
Have you? Where?
Wow.
I ran, my first was DC Marine Corps, and I ran New York twice. Once in 2001, right after 9/11, which was just really amazing, and Chicago twice.
Wow. Are you still an avid runner?
You know, my knees don't love it anymore, so I Peloton bike
Peloton.
now.
Shout out to Peloton.
but
Who's your
I-
instructor?
Cody Rigsby.
Cody,
Is there
yeah.
another instructor?
That's the only one on there.
Yeah.
I went to a live Alex Toussaint class recently, and my wife did a live Allie Love class, and those were both so fun.
I do love Allie Love. I'm an Allie Love fan also. I'll do Jen Sherman sometimes, Robin, of course, but I'm
Cody's so happy and high energy.
I'm terrified of Alex Toussaint. I can't do his
He's
classes.
terrifying. That's why
Yeah.
I had to take his class live. Terrified.
How long was it?
It was 2 20-minute classes.
Okay.
So you had to do both of them and stay in the studio.
Okay. Was it fun in the studio?
Do you want to know who got first place in the class? Because I'm willing to tell you who got first place in that live
I
class.
wonder who did. Yeah, I would love to know.
Right.
Just happens to be the case both times. Both 20-minute classes. This guy right here got first place.
That is,
I did.
I am
But everyone
very
else were
impressed.
15 years old.
I'm just so everyone else is 20, 30 years older in the life class. Who cares? That's not the point. I was in there with a bunch of professional athletes who were all cyclists, who were all doping, and I took first place. Both of those. It was so much fun.
I am
impressed.
impressed
Yeah,
because
we're all
that would
impressed.
be in that class. That is an actual accomplishment.
Now I don't come close to first place when I take classes online. There's just unheard of instructors.
Yeah.
but there was somebody and he was celebrating his 800th ride and his birthday, and I was not going to let him have that birthday present.
No,
Is that wrong with me?
No, that's
Thank
like
you.
letting your
Thank
kids
you.
win games. Like you have
That's
to show
how I felt
them.
about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was yours. That
It was my
impressive,
moment.
Chad.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Yeah. I love that.
Do you have any professional pet peeves?
I absolutely hate coffee slurping. Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
we're just
if it's
slurping.
too
in
That's
general.
just a
hot.
life pet peeve.
If it is too hot to, but in a morning meeting, like if it's too hot to drink, just don't drink it. Why are you making those noises? It drives me insane.
Blowing incessantly to try to
Yes.
cool it down.
Yeah. I mean, the real one would really be like lying. Just tell
Yeah.
me the truth. Tell me the whole truth. If something got screwed up, we'll figure it out together. When you lie about it, it's always the lie. And
Yeah.
then that takes me longer and it makes you look bad in the long
Yeah.
term. And it's just easier. And so I would say that's probably the big one. But also, if you're going to lie and serve coffee, you're probably going to not be around that
Last day on
long.
the
Yeah.
job. Yeah.
All right, this next one. If you weren't in your job and someone said you're never allowed to work in sports again, what's the dream job?
So curling doesn't count because
Curling?
You can't be
Because
in
curling
sports.
is a sport. You
Yeah.
can't be a professional
Okay.
curler.
I would want to work on movies. I would love to work on a movie set. Like,
And do what?
Like a Top Gun Maverick type. Oh,
Yeah,
I
epic.
don't even care. I just think it looks super cool. Like I don't
assistant to
know.
the director. I
Yeah,
don't know.
something like that. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be a creative camera person or something,
Yeah.
but I mean, it takes a million operational minds to make those things happen.
Yeah.
And I just think it would be really cool.
Yeah.
Travel the world and
Oh yeah, that'd be amazing. What's your favorite restaurant in Indy?
in Indy. Well, I have to say Commission Row. It's our new restaurant next to the building that we built and is operated by a partner, Cunningham Restaurant Group. I was actually there last night and it was phenomenal.
That's so cool.
I know Max Siegel was on. I listened to his and he gave, of course, Elmo's is iconic, as is Long's Donuts is the other one, I think he said.
Oh, you have a good donut shop
We have a really good, really good donut shop. But
and good pretzels.
yeah,
Jeez.
I know but Bluebeard is another one that I really like. That's a smaller independent restaurant that when I have friends in from out of town, I often go to, and it's also fantastic. So
That's
we have
really
a
special.
pretty good food scene actually.
Doesn't get a good reputation nationally for being a good food scene, but clearly it is.
It's growing. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
You just have to spend more time there. We'll get you guys to all
We
these
do.
places.
At the All-Star game coming up.
Yeah.
We need to be there.
You do actually.
we
I
should,
think it's going to be.
That'd be amazing.
I think it's going to be a really fun weekend.
Shout out to the Excel Sports team for representing Caitlin Clark as well.
I know. We work really closely with Aaron and Colleen, and they're fantastic partners of ours.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to trade jobs. Their phones don't stop ringing.
Yeah,
I
they
have a
don't.
feeling, but they are the best at what they do, and we've enjoyed. I've enjoyed getting to know them. I had not had much interaction with on the agent side before. Taking on this job was one of the new things that I've sort of picked up and I'm learning, and I've really enjoyed it.
It's amazing. Congrats on all the success so far.
Thanks.
And win a championship this year for us.
We're going to try. Well, give us a year, maybe another year.
Yeah,
but we're going to
exactly.
try. We're going to try. We're going to compete every year. I
Yeah.
can tell you that. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Mel, thanks so much for joining us.
It's been a
Awesome
pleasure.
spending time with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.